if you keep privileging efficiency over engagement. You're stacking the odds against you. This isn't a nice to have. This is actually your point of difference. Who are you without your titles?
Today's guest is Dan Haesler. Dan wrote the book, The Act of Leadership. He works with elite athletes as well as corporate leaders and organizations. I feel like a lot of teams are in a pressure cooker. If you are going to be a fantastic leader, how do you operate in a pressure cooker?
They were focused on all the uncertainty at the expense of what they could control. If we go jumping at shadows at the expense of that, then we've lost this game. The highest performing teams I work with are the ones who are the most...
Welcome to the Rev Up Rebellion podcast. Today's guest is Dan Haesler, a performance and leadership coach who specializes in mindset, mental skills, and leadership. He works with elite athletes and sporting teams, as well as corporate leaders and organizations. Dan's worked with members of the Australian Olympic and Commonwealth Games teams, as well as athletes from a wide variety of sporting teams, from Penrith Panthers, Socceroos, and Wallabies. Dan is a director of Cut Through Coaching. And as I mentioned, they're working across educational organizations, corporates, sporting organizations, throughout all of their work focusing on leadership. Dan wrote the book, The Act of Leadership, and it has been a best-selling Australian business title ever since. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. After speaking at a conference, at the same conference as you, I've been dying to get you on, so thank you for coming in.
Thanks for the opportunity. Look forward to the chat.
So we always start with the same question, which is, what is either an idea that you want to rebel against, or maybe it's just a conversation that you think needs to be elevated in leadership circles and put on the table at this point in time?
It's the same wherever I go, is reframing what might commonly be called like the soft skills, the connection pieces, building trust, values, it's being able to sort of elevate that in priority. I would argue in the same way that we think about strategic plan, in the way that we think about KPIs, in the way that we think about, profit and loss, whatever we think the priorities are, this is what we have to have. And it's nice to have, the soft skills stuff. It's nice to have the connection. I kind of like to absolutely sort of elevate that because more often than not, it's that people think I'm being brought in to talk about how to raise KPIs and how to improve performance, and as my role as a performance coach, but really it's the performance will largely take care of itself if we've actually done the proper work in and around what is called normally, sometimes pejoratively, the soft skills. Yeah. It turns out, right, the soft skills are actually the hard part. Yeah. It's dealing with people. That's the hardest part of the job. So, so that's what I'd like leaders to really sort of reframe their thinking about, is how do we get as deliberate about that stuff as we are the strategy.
What does that look like for you? Because I actually think that's interesting, because obviously at the moment, AI's conversation at the moment. I think we went 10 seconds without me saying the word AI, because that's kind of where we're at. But I think it's interesting to see on the flip side, like in our spheres of revenue and sales, there's actually been a 70% increase in demand for relationship-based skills. And particularly there's sort of a cohort more from a sales lens than leadership lens who came through into sales into COVID. And actually it was all on Zoom and we didn't have that face-to-face piece. And so actually it's interesting to see that is starting to be a bit of a wave of actually, hang on, it's not just soft, warm and fuzzy skills. But I also think that sometimes it gets thrown around lightly, like, oh, how do you be a trusted advisor, or how do you build trust? And I think it's thrown around quite lightly. And actually, in my view, it's actually, there's a lot more to it than that. So if you were to say, right, elevate those soft skills, what does that look like for you?
First and foremost, I guess I'd say the reframing of it. This isn't a nice to have. Like, this is actually your point of difference. So if I sort of locate it in the work I do in sport, for example, the highest performing teams I work with are the ones who are the most connected and accountable to each other. So when people talk about, we lack accountability here, you might do, but for me, it'll be because you lack connection. So if we're really connected, and I mean connected, I don't mean we get on. I mean, we're truly connected, we're aligned, we understand each other's drives, we understand when we're a little bit off our game, and I can see that, and I've got your back. We've agreed that we're all showing up to be our best, so everyone else can be their best. When we've aligned on those things and we're connected on that, it becomes a lot easier to hold people accountable. The problem we have is, as you said, one, we've got, and this is a bit of a generalization, but I think it's true, we've got cohort after cohort now coming in who their whole education and learning experiences are going increasingly online, increasingly performative based. I think about, for example, uni students, aside from the best part of uni in England being you went away and just, but literally you went away, you met people from well outside of your normal group. You would have a contest of ideas over a few beers, perhaps, but you, assuming you had a level of curiosity and empathy, you'd learn about other people's perspectives, and that was the informal stuff. And then on campus, you're in tutorials where you're debating stuff. I look at pretty much not every, that's a massive claim, a lot of university students' experiences now, they do the tutorial, they do the keynote or the lecture, it's a recorded thing. And then the tutorials, if they go, are also online, and they're not engaged in that. They're not learning how to engage with humans.
Yeah.
Right. And so then you go, okay, well, that's okay, because we have, everything's online now. We'll do Zoom meetings online or Teams meetings online. And there's so much of the interpersonal connection that's lost if all I'm seeing is that, 2x2 little square of you. So you talk about trust. Well, as soon as I look away from the screen, that's chipping away at trust, because I don't know what you're doing. You're now reading emails, you're now looking at something else, you're checking your phone. So it's an interesting challenge that people have got, which is where I think the more evolved teams, organizations, leaders are realizing that if we truly want our people to be able to really, bring their best, we need each other. Right? It's no one's an island, and people who will put that they'll make time for it. It's in the schedule. Even the simple things like, in meetings, making sure there is a connection piece at the start, not just straight to business, or a hard stop, the language that people are using. I've got a hard stop at 2:30. Why? Well, I've got a meeting at 2:30. Well, you know what I mean? So it's like bang, bang, transaction. And I think it misses the point. We're privileging efficiency over engagement, and that's why AI is. That's why we're freaking out about it, because AI is more efficient than us, right? That's why we're threatened by it. But if we actually looked at our role as humans is to engage with each other. I'm never going to say AI is not going to do that, but it can't do it at the moment.
Yeah, and do you think that to sort of ignite some of that camaraderie and some of that, like you said, I've got your back, and I know some of the best teams I've worked in, it actually felt like that. It really felt like that. I was with a former colleague last night, and when I was going through a really hard time, she had my back, she covered for me, and it felt like that, and it's a great place to be. And if I look back to that was probably more office based, and dare I bring in that debate. Do you think to form that connection, it's more in person and it's more bringing that connection together in person rather than, like you said, on the squares? Or am I putting words in your mouth on that one?
No, I think again, in the name of efficiency, we've missed out what it means to be human. To think that people can work from home. Yeah, you know what? There's a whole heap of efficiencies there. I can take my kids to school. I can do meetings when I need to do them. And I work from home myself here, and I encourage my team to work from home. But we also have an office space, and I'd get out and do face to face. The point we're sort of making here is that, if we keep privileging efficiency, we're going to get to a point where it is just purely transactional. And so, when leaders go, I just need them to care as much as I do, or I need them to buy in, or why aren't we aligned? I don't like talking in absolutes, but what I would say is you're stacking the odds against you if you keep privileging efficiency over engagement. So so for me, the idea that organizations would not want people to come into work, and again, so then you've got individuals. So let's say the organisation say, we want you back in at the office, right? Then you've got the individuals going, no, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
And I've got a working theory on this. So when COVID happened, one of the biggest thing, the biggest pillar, if you like, So the pillars of engagement are this: a sense of belonging, a sense of autonomy, a sense of mastery, and a sense of purpose, right? So if I've got those four things, if we've got those four things in our team, so we feel like we belong here, we've got volition and agency, autonomy in what we do, we're good at what we do, and there's a bigger reason over and above profit and loss and whatever, we're all in, right? COVID, every one of those pillars got cut down, right? So belonging, well, I can't see my mates. I can't, hang out where I want to hang out. So I'm on my own, or I'm with the family. The autonomy piece was the largest one, I reckon. So I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I couldn't even buy however many toilet rolls I wanted, right? And here's the thing, right? So when the restrictions eased, I would argue that these pillars started rebuilding, but some built back at a quicker rate. And I think autonomy built back. It's like, I'm gonna flex this autonomy muscle now. And the easiest way to flex autonomy is to actually say no. If I say yes to everything, I don't have any autonomy because I'm just ceding my time, my boundaries, my effort, my energy. So the easiest way, I'll just say no. So you come back to work. No, I can do my job here, and because we proved we could do the job, we might not do it well, but we could do the job, then what's the compelling case to come back? And then your business go, how much money could we save here if we actually closed that floor? How much money are we losing in rent? So again, I appreciate there's probably more nuance to it than what I'm giving, but I'd argue that they're pretty strong contributors to why we're now in a space where, people are challenged in the workplace. Engagement's never been great in workplaces. Let's not kid ourselves. Like it's not, but it's been better, and it could definitely be better if leaders got a bit more evolved around how they thought about this stuff.
I think it's also interesting. I do a lot of kickoffs, same as you, and it's really nice when you see those ones that are face-to-face, in person, seeing people come together. And it's interesting how many people are like, I never met you before because you work in Perth and I'm in Sydney, and this is the first time.
Or you work on the floor below.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you work down the corridor. Yeah.
And it's interesting to see the magic that happens just within a couple hours of people connecting and going, oh, that's really interesting. I'm doing that too. Oh, we should talk on that. And it's so fascinating to see how quickly some of those sparks and connection can fly, and that collaboration and stuff. And it's actually quite nice to witness and see. And I feel like on that, we're going full circle coming back to it. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, one of the biggest, if ever I'm asked to go into a big corporate place, I'll ask them, what's the biggest challenge? Oh, we're just so siloed. That's what people say. We work in silos. There's so much expertise, there's so much potential, but we just don't bring it to the surface because everyone's kind of running their own race. And so there's the understanding that it's happening, but then you go, okay, so how have you set this up? Oh, well, we've got this department, we've got this department, and it's like, so everything, the biggest challenge is really a result of the systems you've set up. Like, everything that you're doing is man-made, right? There's nothing, or woman-made, there's nothing there that's just a force of nature.
Yeah.
Right? We've created it. So, we're all silent. Okay, so what if we start breaking this down a little bit? So, whether we can always bring people together all the time, I'm not suggesting that's going to be viable, but I reckon some of the people more of the time should be a bit of an aim, perhaps.
And we've seen it change quite quickly. Like, a lot of our clients used to joke that we were the marriage counselors between sales and marketing. And we'd find actually just at a very basic level, most of them didn't even talk regularly or communicate regularly. Different KPIs, different, reporting line, different meetings, different lines of communication. I think LinkedIn did a study that showed that over 75% of the time who marketing were targeting and who sales were targeting were completely different audiences. So we're not even aligned at a basic level. I think it's interesting there that you talked about silos being one of the greatest challenges you're hearing. One of the greatest challenges I'm hearing is around pace of change, uncertainty. We actually had a load of senior leaders together about 2 weeks ago now, and we asked the question around greatest challenge. And it was, it's so busy. The pace of change is wild. I'm calling it like the busyness epidemic. And then you've got the uncertainty of what's happening in market, what's happening with politics, what's happening, you know, with global tensions and AI and all of this. And I think it's a really challenging time, in fairness, to be a leader leading through that. What's your take on how do you lead through that level of uncertainty?
Yeah, I think there'd be a million ways to kind of think about this, but if people are working with me, I kind of bring it back to 2 or 3 kind of core ideas. So the first one is, it's a bit of a cliche in sport, but we just got to control the controllables. Right. And so those, as you say, there's so much volatility out there. It's almost, I don't know if anyone else plays this game, but I put the TV on, like news on, when I wake up in the morning, and I'm kind of like, like try and guess how ludicrous, the headline is going to be this time. What ridiculous statement has old mate made over in the States,
Yeah.
And it's like, and I've always underplayed it. Right. So it's really volatile. Obviously, we know that. That's not saying anything new. But I think sometimes a lot of my work is around attention control. So where are you putting your attention? Right. So what I mean by attention is, so think about attention. We've got awareness and we've got focus. So I can have an awareness of the volatility. I can have an awareness of, I don't know what's around this corner. I can have an awareness of the stresses, the tensions, market forces. I can have an awareness of that. But my focus has to be on what I can control. And when we boil it all down, like on a very basic level, understanding actually we don't have control over much, right? Really. But the depth to which we can control that is actually quite significant. So what do I mean? I mean, the stories I tell myself, for example, the way I choose to walk into a room to have a meeting with a team member, I'm 100% in control of that. I'm 100% in control of whether I choose to leave the day at work and go home and be as whatever adjective you want to put in, as caring, as present, parent or partner as I can be. I am 100% in control of that. Now, it doesn't feel like that sometimes, because that's why people say, just such a bad day. Like, you're not going to believe what happened. And we sort of have these kind of like a mindless, just roller coaster kind of day where we're not controlling the roller coaster. We're on it. Right. But the bloke down in the thing is go faster this way. Right. And it's kind of like, but you can get off the roll. Oh, not really. Because what if it doesn't stop? And so we have these kind of ways of thinking. And the strongest arm of my work, I guess, is around this idea of helping people be mindful and deliberate. So I've got this awareness. I'm mindful of what's going on, but then I'm deliberate about how I'm choosing to show up there. So that's on an individual level. Then you can sort of bring that. Okay. So with a team. Okay, being aware of that as a team and collectively working together to manage that, right? And I was working with a big organization a couple of years ago, and we were talking about something similar, although obviously pace of change, maybe it's exponentially different again now. But he spoke about this idea of he felt that they'd missed the mark because they were focused on all the uncertainty at the expense of what they could control. So they were kind of jumping at shadows. They were throwing anything out to see what sticks. And the problem is, when you throw a million things out and see what sticks, when you have a success, you don't actually know which of those variables was the success, right? Whereas what he came to the realization was, and his words were this idea of, we've got to radically protect our core. And that phrase has just stuck with me ever since he said it. We have to radically protect our core, who we are, what we stand for, the value we give our clients. Now, how we give that value will be different, but if we're saying whatever, we're saying the value is of working with us, we have to radically protect that. And if we go jumping at shadows at the expense of that, then we've lost this game, right? So then the tag on is, and then you innovate at the edges. So that was his way of thinking about it. And I've actually sort of thought about that with lots of different teams or individuals that I work with, sporting and corporate. So if I said that to you, what would that mean? What is your core? And you know the most common answer is, don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
They don't know because they may have known in the past, but it's kind of morphed. It's changed.
It's changed over time.
Yeah, and maybe it should, right? Because we should perhaps, there could be an argument that says we should evolve.
Yeah.
But to not actually know what it is in that moment, like who you are, what you stand for, the value you offer, and be crystal clear on it, what your values are, what the definitions of those values are, what the behaviours are that attach to that, what the behaviours which fall outside of that. You can't go bang, 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 bang.
Yep.
You don't have values.
Yeah.
You don't have a core.
And I guess it's beyond, the marketing values that might be on the wall.
Yeah.
It's then, can you articulate them and demonstrate them?
Yeah. Without looking at the wall.
Without,
Right.
without.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's interesting that Jeff Bezos always talked about when he was starting Amazon and it was kind of wild and no one really knew where e-commerce was going to go. And, as he scaled that business, talked about he looks at what's not going to change. So much is going to change, but what's not going to change. So in his world, people are always going to want great customer experience. No one's going to go, can you make the customer experience more shit, please?
Yeah, exactly.
And then also speed. People are always going to want speed. No one's going to be saying, actually slow down my delivery, please. Yeah. So he kind of was betting the house on what's not going to change and making those predictions. But coming back to your first point, when you were talking at the start there about, you get to choose how you show up, you get to choose how you walk into that meeting or how you walk home to your kids. Do you help people with whether it's rituals or I don't know, some sort of mindset routine to go, okay, I've just had to make someone redundant or I've just had a really challenging, confronting conversation and then I've got to be able to like shake that off and then walk into the next meeting. How in practice do you do that? Yeah.
So, I mean, that is mental skills in a nutshell, right? So, let's go the other way. So let's say I've just had to make someone redundant and it was awful. There were tears and I feel a bit shit because maybe at the back of my mind, it's like, I've been complicit in this. I didn't pick them up early enough. Or I made a bad hire, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so normal human nature dictates that I'm going to carry that into the next meeting.
Yeah.
Right? That's just normal. That's just human nature, right? The problem with human nature is, whilst it's normal, it's just not very useful. Right, particularly in high performing environments, particularly in high pressure environments, because normal human behavior is essentially, we're wired to kind of either just arc up in those situations or run away from those situations, very broadly speaking. Whereas what we need to show up is this idea of being mindful and deliberate. So that's mental skills in a nutshell, being able to see the situation for what it is and then choose and make a choice. And I'm not saying it's easy. So, so if let me use sport as an example, because really the mental skills stuff is probably more obvious in sport than anywhere else, but they absolutely translate. So if I've just made a mistake on the footy field, and I'll use a real life example of an athlete I've worked with, and my first thought is, oh my God, my phone is just going to be blowing up with abuse. And again, real examples, death threats, people telling me they've lost thousands of dollars on a bet that they put on and I've cost them that because I've stuffed up and they didn't win the game. Commentators who for the past 3 weeks have been saying I'm not worth the money I'm on. And I know that they're on the panel tonight. So I know, and this is happening in the game.
Yeah.
Right, in the moment, right? Normal human behavior would be, get me out of here, right?
Yeah.
I've had enough, I'm done, right? So what we need to do is give you used the words before, like mindset, mantras, all that kind of stuff. But really, mindset, so mantras, breathing techniques, all that kind of stuff, that's, if I think of it like building a house, that's kind of like the window dressing.
Yeah.
Right? Or it could be the roof, or it might be a bit of paint, right? Which, can patch stuff up. But if your foundations are rocky, right? So if your foundations are shit, it doesn't matter how good your roof is.
Yeah.
Right? When it'll look all right for a bit, but when things get tough, your house is going to fall down. And so when I'm working with an athlete, they think it's going to be mindset. They think it's going to be breathing, meditation, mantras, self-talk. How do I build confidence? And the first question I ask an athlete, and it's a bit like this core question we asked before, I said, well, who are you without a football in your hands? Who are you if this football was taken away from you? And again, the most common answer I get from an athlete is, no idea. Because they are what they do. Because their identity forms when they're an adolescent. And if you're a professional athlete, I'm going to bet that you were pretty handy as an adolescent. So when most adolescents are trying on different interests, different peer groups, different music tastes, different activities, they're not. They're doing the same thing with the same people, getting rewarded when they're good at it, right?
Yeah.
And so they learn, I'm not saying every athlete, but I'm here to tell you the vast majority of athletes start learning that they are what they do and people value them more when they're good at it. So I now have to play well to be well. So if I'm not playing well, even without all the nonsense I went through, the DMs on the phone, the commentators, even without that, it would be hard.
Yeah.
You then compound it with all the added stuff. That's where, we're just piling on the pressure, right? So what I have to do is, it's a bit like the core question. Let's go back to it. Who are you? Who are you? I'm not asking what you do. Who are you? Right. And so this is a long-winded way of getting back to your question. So if I am my LinkedIn title, right? If I am the recognition that I have on the wall, if I am my bonus, right? If I am, the leader, whatever it is, then anything that knocks me out of that will knock me as a person. So what I like to encourage people to do is kind of think about this idea of, okay, well, if we took all of that away, who are you and who would you want to be? And that's what we get back to. And so every transition that you have, that's what we're trying to get back to. Who are you? Not what are you doing? Does it mean it's easy? No, it's not easy. It's really hard. But at least it gives you a chance, because a lot of people can't answer that question. So I do this workshop where I ask people to separate. If you couldn't mention your job, if you couldn't mention, and so this hits people a bit hard sometimes. I'll say, because they'll say, don't worry about me, Dan. I've got heaps more than my job. I'm a parent. I'm a partner. I'm involved in community sport or whatever. And I go, yeah, that's great. That's actually good. But let's be clear, that's still who you are to somebody else, right? It's still a role that you play. You never want to do this thought experiment, but imagine, who would you be without that? Who would you be without the parent role if that was taken away? Who would you be without, and who are you on your own, essentially, is what we're asking, right? And that's your foundation. And so the idea is then you don't draw your identity from what you do. You understand your identity and put it into what you do. And so I can then choose, well, you know what, I'm going to show up. So some athletes I work with, they need to show up aggressive. Like they need to show up as, alpha. If you're looking at them as a human, you might go, geez, I won't want them around my kids. But then you see them with their kids, you go, oh my God, of course I want my kid. Like, awesome, completely different. They're still the same person, but they're just putting different parts of their identity in. Just because they're aggressive on the field, that doesn't mean then they have to be aggressive here. But and a lot of people get that sort of the direction of that relationship wrong. They draw their identity from what they do rather than put their identity into what they do.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I started working for IBM when I was 19 in an internship at uni, and then went through their grad scheme and kept on going up with them. And I'm an IBMer. And that's the identity. And we were blue blood, and people used to joke to me, like, you could cut me, and I was like so blue blooded, and that's all I ever wanted to do.
Which is great for them, by the way. Right. So no, in all seriousness. So there's a real, that they want that. Yeah. Right. Which, and so I understand the utility of doing that, and they want that. But from an individual point of view, as maybe you're about to explore, it's hard, right? It makes
when
things
you
tricky.
leave, it's then like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then, your phone stops ringing because now you don't have a big title or whatever it might be. So do you find, so if you were, hypothetically today, you were starting working with a corporate, is that where you would start at that identity in that core piece? Yeah.
It's funny. I did a big event last week with a big sales team type thing. I was going to say the name of the thing. I don't know what, but And again, like, so I had a meeting with them beforehand because they've said, "Oh, we want this, this, and this."
Yeah.
And I go, and so I had the meeting. I know you said what you want, right? But I sort of I said, "But what if we did this? Because this is kind of like the and they were like, "Yeah, cool." So it's always going to be my preference to start with the foundation. If we're building a house, start with the foundations, not the roof.
Yeah.
Right. Get clear on the building materials as opposed to the paint.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we'll get there. Just to be clear, we'll put a roof on. We'll make it look good. So, but the point is, if I've got a self-talk piece or a breathing routine that's not attached to anything that's authentic to me, you will get a little. So I'm sure you've come across the idea of breath work, and just my gran used to say to me if I was upset, just take a deep breath, Dan, right? And it turns out gran, without the benefit of all the neuroscience, which is now proving her to be accurate, but it calms down.
Go, gran.
It calms down the sympathetic nervous system. It's good work, gran. Great, top knowledge. But you do your breath work combined with a way of seeing the world and a narrative about how you show up and where you get your sense of worth as a person from and how you contribute to this planet, right? It's, again, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it becomes easier to do that.
I think what's interesting right now is there's almost some of what you're saying is like, slow down to reset the foundations to then go fast and get the performance. And I think what's really challenging right now is I feel like a lot of teams are in a pressure cooker of, right, we're behind our numbers are down, markets going wild with stock exchanges changing overnight or dynamics changing overnight. And I think there's a pressure cooker of, well, we've just made some of the team redundant. That's not going to be great for culture and us all feeling like we're all as one. Plus you got to hit your number, plus you're behind. And it's like that, how do you operate in a pressure cooker? And I can almost feel like hear people in the back of my head going, I'd love to do that work with Dan, but not yet, not now. I don't have time. And I think there's this really interesting dynamic at the moment around that, because it's like, I don't have time because we're just too busy. We've got to hit the number for the quarter. But I'm sort of also arguing at the moment, I feel there's also a level of, we don't have time not to. Like, what's your take on that? Like, how do you operating in that pressure cooker environment?
I understand where it's coming from, but that's the normal human behavior I was talking about. Right. So normal human behavior says, no, prioritize. So what happens when we're under pressure is something, our cognitive map shifts. So we become task orientated, and we become focused on what we think the goal is, right? And the problem with that is that the actual goal, like being able to do this sustain. So, the amount of times people say, we've got to make our number. Okay, cool. And people will bullshit themselves and say, it'll be all right. All this will be worth it when we make our number. And that's bullshit, because as soon as you make that number, there's another number you've got to get.
Yeah, resets for the next quarter and you start at zero.
And it's like, you're setting yourself up for this like cortisol, adrenaline, high emotion, your nervous system's constantly spiked. But what gets me is like, I wonder at what point you start to realize you've been bullshitting yourself. Because that's the real bit when you go, because up until now, right, if I still believe, it'll be worth it. All this will be worth it if we just make our number, right? That'll sustain me perhaps. But what happens when you realize, oh shit, it doesn't actually? Because now I've got another one. I've got to do it again. Got to do it again. Got to do it again. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I would suggest that is a precursor to burnout. And so when people say I don't have time for it, it's okay, I get that. But you can either make time for it now, or you're going to have to take time to get well down the track, or completely reevaluate your life choices, or mend that broken relationship because you're so focused over here, you've missed what's going on over here. Despite them telling you, and every time they told you, it added more pressure on, and instead of focusing on there, you got even more task orientated. So pressure's a funny thing, it's objectively, pressure doesn't exist, right? Really, right? It doesn't, you can't measure it, right? So it's an internal construct that I actually, when I'm working with anyone really, like if I'm working with a first responder, right, and do you feel pressure going into it? Yeah, I do. But they use it in a way that elevates them, it sharpens them, as opposed to paralyzes them. But then what first responders have, what good athletes, good teams have, good corporate teams have, is then a debrief process.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
So the debrief then is not just what did we do, how well did we do it, who stuffed up, but it's, mapped against our core, our values. How do we recalibrate now? So, we can leave whatever's it. Oh, you need a bit of extra time to decompress, for want of a better phrase. Yeah, okay, cool, take it. And we have that flexibility within the team to see performance, like high performance, right? There's lots of different ways to think about it, but I would think about it in terms of the best high performers are those who can do it sustainably. So it's not an either or. I can be a high performer or I can have well-being. No. They're two sides of the same coin, where in a lot of places they're kind of seen as different currencies. It's like two different things. No, they're two sides of the same coin. Because if you're my high performer, I don't want that to be at the expense of your personal life or or your health, or the relationships on the team because you're so driven.
Yeah.
When we make excuses for people who are high performers and they're burning people, it's just because they're such a high performer. No, it's because they are fundamentally dysfunctional, right? And that we might be seeing it seep out here, but I guarantee it's seeping out elsewhere as well. So let's help them. What if this is getting out there now, because I often think that what if, a lot of the time we talk about what impact is this employee or this new player going to have on our organization. And often, in sport, they'll say, I just want to leave the jersey in a better place than when I found it. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's this idea of I want to do my part, right? And I put it to leaders, but how are they going to be better as a result of being under your care? If I'm a big corporate, how are our leaders and our senior execs, how are they going to be better people courtesy of working here, as opposed to this is a one-way thing where they've just got to add to us. And those, again, everyone's different, so there'll be different things that you could tap into there. But for me, that for me is what we call the real goal. Because if everyone's better as a result of being with us, then all our KPIs, not all of them maybe because of the external variables, but at least we're controlling for what we can control, and we're optimizing for that. And we're stacking the odds in our favor of being high performers over the long term, rather than this game of hit a target, recover, hit another target, recover, hit a target, recover, leave.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because I think when you're in it, it's hard to see. Like I distinctly remember when I was quite young in my career at IBM, I had a leader say to me, Abbie, like, you're performing, you're doing really well. My biggest concern about you is you're going to burn out. And I was like 20 something. I'm like, oh, no, not going to happen to me. Like bulletproof. Yeah. And I just like, I dismissed it, even though I was told to my face that was my biggest career risk. Yeah. And, I think 5 odd years later, completely hit a wall, had chronic fatigue and burnt out and all the things. But I think when you're in it, you don't see it. Yeah. And so you've been talking about sustainable performance there as sort of one core element. But what I'm also interested in is you've worked in all these different walks of life. So you've said there, first responders, you've talked obviously about a lot you do in sport, leadership. You've written your book on active leadership and done the podcast. So you've seen all these different walks of life. What do you think are like the absolute fundamental non-negotiables? They're true of whichever walk of life if you are going to be a fantastic leader that is sustainable for the long term, these are your non-negotibles. Yeah.
It's interesting because I'm writing another book, and
do we get a preview?
Well, possibly, yeah. It's pretty early days. It's going to be out next year, but one of the things I'm tossing up actually is this idea of non-negotiables. Because as humans, I'm wondering, is there anything that's truly non-negotiable? Right? Really, you know what I mean? Like, because you could go to the extreme, and I would argue that most things are negotiable. There are things which are preferable. Right? It's preferable that, and just make stuff up, it's preferable that we exercise X amount of times a week. It's preferable, that we have trust and respect in our teams, right? It's preferable, right? Is it non-negotiable? Well, probably not, because people are people. Yeah. And there's going to be times where we're going to have to negotiate what trust and respect looks like, because everyone knows what it means, but it means different things to different people, right? So respect for you would be different to what I think of as respect. And we might be more or less on the same page, or we might be similar, but it's unlikely that we'll be exact. If we were to write down our definition and list the behaviors of what was most important, 1 through 10, we would no way on earth would we come up with exactly the same definition, exactly the same behaviors, right? So we have to negotiate in order to get alignment. That's my little rant on non-negotiables. But what I have said...
Glad I asked the question.
But what I have seen are common themes which show up, and I've used this phrase a couple of times now. The best, and that's a subjective opinion, but there's this mindful and deliberate approach to what they do. So they're not doing things by chance. So they don't leave things to chance. If it's on the schedule, it's on there for a reason. It's been thought through, and there's rationales for it. There's, so why are we doing this? There's an answer straight away. Why is it important now? There's an answer. So there's that. There's this level of equanimity. So this level of composure and calmness, regardless of good, bad, or indifferent performance, right? So I work at the Panthers in the NRL. We've got a coach there, Ivan Cleary, who is one of, like I say to it, it's one of, it's so uncommon. It's first and foremost, it's just this level of equanimity around. If a non-rugby league fan was to come into like a review session after the weekend, and you didn't know what the result was, you would probably have a hard time telling if we'd won or lost based on how the review was done. So there's like this composure, this calmness. We're looking at the same sort of things. We know what success looks like, and they're going at those things. So if it's a win, it's not like we're falling in love with ourselves. If it's a loss, so in lesser performing environments, it's absolutely this. And I know that because I work with athletes in other environments where if they win, it's like a party, and if they lose, it's like a funeral. If they lose, they're cancelling community engagements where they're going to the schools and things like that to double down and do extra sessions. If they win, it's, don't worry, we might skip the review, and it's like, what, because what we're after is consistency, right? So mindful and deliberate, consistent. And the last, what I would put on my list is just this uncommon consistency to sort of privilege process over outcome. So we're interested in outcomes, right, obviously, but we also know that many outcomes are out of our control. Like we might play really well, but lose because it turns out, the opposition are entitled to play well. The referee might make a poor call, might just be one mistake in an otherwise perfect game, right? You might play really poorly and win just because the other team were more shit.
Off their game.
Yeah, exactly, right? So the outcomes, obviously, they're the attractive bit. And people will look at me and go, come on, it's all about winning. And it's like, I'm not saying winning isn't important, right? In fact, winning is really important, really important. That's why we can't focus on it.
That's interesting.
Right?
I've heard a lot about that, about like the Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
Not focusing on whether they're going to get the gold or whatever, and focusing on that process.
Because the process is what you can control.
Yeah.
The win you cannot control. I'm not saying, again, there's no Olympic athlete who doesn't want to win, right? But what most athletes, unless there's a slim, I guess, proportion of personality types that can be just really outcome driven, and they want to be the best and they want to dominate everyone, and that might work for them. But as a general rule for humans, a better starting point is to say, okay, well, what's the process that we know if you get that right, day in, day out, for 3.5, 4 years, that when you go to there, you're stacking the odds in your favour of being able to go out there and put it all on the line and show up as your best. That is usually preferable than the person who is focused purely on the outcomes. And you see that in team sports, you see it in individuals, and I'd argue you see it in corporate land as well. What are the processes that we know that if they're at our core, it's based on who we are, who we want to be, how we want to show up, then it's you've got that sense of agency and volition in your own destiny. It doesn't, nothing is guaranteed, right? So that's the deal we've made in this game. In any game, nothing's guaranteed, you know. But what we have to do is, understand if we can commit as a group, as a team, to the things that we believe to be true, then at least if it doesn't play out as we want at the end, we don't look in the mirror and go, well, we beat ourselves. It's like, you know, we put it all out there. So, you know, most athletes, I'm not saying they're not disappointed if they don't win, but they won't be, at least they can live with the result.
Yeah.
You know, go, well, I put it all out there. Like,
gave it everything.
Yeah, they were just better on the day. And a lot of, you know, you'll often hear a lot of athletes talk about, well, we got a PB, you know, especially in the Olympics, you know, like I went out there and that is my personal best. So, you know, I literally, in history, have never done better. Might not do better again, but I put it all out there on that day. So
we might be coming full circle on this, but for an organisation who's going, okay, I understand those three elements we've just talked to, but right now we just feel like we're so far off on that. You know, if we have a good quarter or we have a bad quarter, it's actually, like you said, the party or the funeral or the mood of the leader, depending on whether we've had a good day or a bad day, or, you know, some of those different factors that you've talked to there. If it almost feels like too big a leap of like, oh God, that would never happen in our organization. Like, how do you start to get there? Is that back to your core and starting there? Like, how's the roadmap if it feels almost like too far out of reach?
Yeah, it's there has to be a desire from the organization to want to close that, you know, bridge that gap. So if there isn't that, then I think there's an uncomfortable conversation you have to have with yourself, which is going, well, so let's say I'm a team member and it's not necessarily my call, you know, as to what the pressures are and whatnot. I guess the first option is, okay, well, in my local environment, in my local team, can we do anything about that? But if not, I guess we've always got to understand that we could go elsewhere. And I know that's, you know, I'm not saying that should be your first, that it shouldn't be your first decision, but I think we have to have boundaries in our own world, which if this is now encroaching on my values, if this is encroaching on my because I'm having such a shit time of it at work, it's impacting how I'm connecting with my teenage kids. And I have that mindfulness that's happening. As you said before, a lot of the time we don't notice. It's like that frog in the boiling pan analogy, right? Like, I don't feel it until it's too late. You don't feel it until your kids turn around and go, well, Dad, you never hear, or blah, 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 right? But what I'm saying is, well, I'm encouraging you, let's take stock of it. You know, there is nothing stopping people at the end of each day or at the end of the week going, did I show up the way I wanted to show up today? Did I show up in the way, you know, when I, you know, was younger, I would hope I would? And if the answer to that is yes, cool. It's not for me to say that, you know, it's not for me to tell you how to live your life. The challenge is when you kind of go, oh, I don't know. And you know what? It's been a while since I felt like that. It's been a while since I felt like I could walk into a room at work and people had my back. It's been a while, you know, it's been a while since I could go to my boss and not have to second guess how he's feeling before I share a challenge I've got. You know what I mean? It's been a while. Okay. How much longer are you going to give it before you decide to do something about it? Again, that's that mindful and deliberate. I'm aware now it's happening. Now I'm going to be deliberate about it. But let's say your team let's say in the ideal world that people go, yeah, actually we would like to bridge this gap a little bit. I mean, there's any number of avenues that people can go down, whether that's, you know, engaging outside organizations. I think outside organizations have a role to play here, particularly if they're good at what they do, because they can shine a light on things. They can bring up insights and data from the group, but also then benchmark it against others and whatnot. But again, without a compelling desire from the top people, it can be really, really difficult. Really difficult. And I'm not sugarcoating it. It's just hard.
Yeah.
So as an individual, you have to decide, well, are you willing to tolerate that? And the organisations which aren't willing to bridge it, they're the ones who then complain about, oh, this generation, they don't care, or my workforce, they just don't, they're not engaged. It's like, you can't, you know what I mean? Well, do something about it, but we don't have time. Okay, well, stop whinging, right?
Yeah.
You've created this.
Yeah. I think that is the biggest thing I'm hearing right now is I don't have time. But it's kind of like, well, like you said, we're having to make time to then get the performance out the back. I'm also interested in what you were saying there about, you gave the example of the coach who was sort of quite level, and whether you win or lost, you wouldn't be able to guess. That sort of skill set, do you see that, and this is probably coming full circle on some of your answers as well, previous answers, but do you see that as like trainable? Because I can imagine, even for me, I'm like, God, I can't imagine being like, I've done a lot around positive psychology. I've done a lot of things, but I'm nowhere near that level. And it is almost going, wow, the pathway to get to that. And it's almost easy sometimes to hear stories like that and go, oh, they were naturally born like that. How do you train that?
Yeah. So it is trainable. So we call them mental skills because you can train it, but like any skill, if you want to get better, you have to train it, right? So whether that's, and everyone's different the way they think about this, right? But like with this particular coach that we're talking about here, like he's genuinely engaged in this space. He sees it as being important. He sees it as being a point of difference from a competitive advantage, but also a really important piece of just being human. Like, so he's got his son happens to be one of the captains of the team, and he gets a lot of pressure, particularly when he goes to play at the next level up. And so whether or not there's part of him that says, well, I can see how useful it is for, on a more an even more personal level. But yeah, it's something that if you've read, the stuff around pos-psych, they'll talk about, people have kind of like a bit of a homeostasis, like a set point for anything, right? So some people just seem more chilled, some people just seem more positive, but the point is that, that's all it is. It's just a start point, and then we can build on that. So, and so some people, are not chilled, but, but again, we can still train it. So again, it comes back to this understanding, what do you stand for? How do you want to walk in the room? I often ask people, like, if you think of the best leaders that you had, they probably, when they came into a room, they probably made you feel something. It wasn't so much what they knew, like, or their tenure or their accomplishments that you go, wow, what a great leader. It was probably for a lot of people more about how they made them feel, supported, empowered, safe. Maybe they saw something in you that you didn't see, but then you think of your worst leaders, how they made you feel when they walked in a room, right? It would be the opposite of those things. You probably clammed up or whatever. You felt less safe. You probably felt more safe when they walked out of the room, right? And so the question I ask is, well, who are you? Like, what's the impact you're having on the people in your team just by walking in the room? What's the impact you have when you sit down at dinner with your kids? What's the impact? You don't need to say anything, but what's the impact that you're having? And the reality is, we're never going to fully know the impact, but we've got an idea. And there are some people who weaponize that, right? There are definitely people who will walk through the office in a certain way because they want to be left alone. Today's not the day to take this challenge or this issue, right? They're not the leaders we need, right? Because if people are truly going to be their best version of themselves, they've got to have that level of psychological safety where I can speak up with an idea that I've got, where I can ask a question. I'm not sure about this, or I've stuffed up here, without me playing this game of, okay, what's the consequences here now if I do this? Is this a career killer? Is this you know what I mean? Like, am I going to be sort of on the outer if I do this? So, yeah.
Do you know what's interesting? When you were saying that, and I was thinking about the best leaders and the worst leaders who I think I've worked with, some of it's actually the really simple things. Like, I remember being on a leadership conference in Vegas, and this guy who was incredibly senior. It's like, Abbie, how are you? How's Sydney? And I was like, he knows my name.
Yeah. And you're in Sydney.
And I'm in Sydney,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
left the UK and I'm in Sydney.
Yeah.
And even just that, or when he was talking to me, he was engaged.
Yeah.
He wasn't looking over my shoulder at like
Yeah.
Bob
Who's
who was
next?
coming.
Yeah,
Who's next?
Yeah.
And just that, like, the fact knew me by name, knew enough about me that I'd moved to Sydney, was actually focused on eye contact, and that like I was, you know, engaged, not just like, off you go.
Yeah.
And so it's actually kind of interesting. It's not even complex. It's like the really simple things.
Yeah. I there's a simple test. It's like when someone says, how are you? Did they wait for an answer?
Yeah.
Like, it's such an Australian thing.
How do you do that in Australia though? How you going? And it's not
how
actually a
you
question.
going? Yeah, it's not a question. And they'll often answer it for you. How you going? Good. It's like, what, you know, but I honestly, I think it's like, who's asking the question? Yeah, how's Sydney?
Yeah.
And then waiting for an answer. Not, how's Sydney? Good, it's beautiful. Yeah, I went to Sydney. What? No.
Yeah.
And again, that's engaging with people. But we don't do that on a Zoom call. It's right, okay, you know, we're waiting. Is everyone here? Is everyone here? Oh, yeah, they just not calling another meeting. Okay, let's get started anyway. Yeah. And then someone comes in 5 minutes after and they just sit there quietly, doesn't say anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the best thing we did was we actually had someone external came in who got us to start our meetings with a personal win and a business win, and we went around the table. Yeah. And it's actually been really, really, really good. It kind of makes me think a lot about that book, like The Gap and the Gain. It kind of forced us to all go, actually, even though we felt like last week was rubbish for whatever reason or hadn't made much progress, here's all the wins. But also from a personal standpoint, and be like, I had no idea you were interested in whatever or what's going on in your life or your family. And I've found, even though that eats into the meeting, it's been a really, really, really valuable step to do.
Yeah, I think of it more like it lubricates the meeting.
Yeah,
like it actually, you know, it's you sort of touched on a phrase a bit earlier, but I forget exactly how you said it. But in the firefighters, they talk about this idea of slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Yeah. Right. So it's just like, let's just slow everything down a little bit. Right, because that's going to pay us back down the track. So if I get to know you better, so let's slow it down. So I get to know you a little bit, understand what's going on, and you know that's from a relationship point of view. But it's then also literally how they, you know, when you see first responders arrive on scene, they never run. Don't know if you've ever seen this, right? They walk.
Yeah, interesting.
So you know, and you'll see it on Saturday Sport. A kid goes down. It might look quite serious. The first aider will always, assuming they're well trained, will always walk, and the reason being they're slowing themselves down, slowing everything down. You imagine a firefighter in a truck bursting through traffic, arriving at scene. They don't know what they're getting. Information's coming in. There's people in trap. There's this. There's that. Everything's going off. What they're doing the whole time is trying to slow their their emotional regulation system. And then they go out and slow it down. And from there, then it's smooth. And once it's smooth, now we can be fast.
And they can engage their prefrontal cortex and they're off, Yeah. And
so, it's so being a little slower at the start of the meeting, just to, how are you going? Oh, the kids have done this. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. We might not think that's got anything to do with our work. I'd say it might not have anything objectively to do with your work, but it'll definitely enhance how you do the work. Yeah, no, I agree with that. So big question to finish up with, just to be really unfair. I've seen quite a few of your posts where you're talking about thriving, and we've touched on it in different places here around positive psychology. We've touched on it in a couple of different ways. If you kind of had to, I've got a 7-year-old, younger than your kids. If you had to sort of describe from everything you've learned, you know, what you think the key to thriving is. Yeah. What do you see it as if you were explaining it to a 7-year-old? Yeah, I think 7-year-olds made my mental level today. It is interesting because, like, for me, you know, like whether it's a 7-year-old, whether my son's 17, my daughter's 15, whether it's people I'm working with, I think this idea of there's what the research says. So the research says, look, if you find a way to understand who you are, where you belong, what you're good at, and how that contributes to something other than yourself, you're going to be in a pretty good space, right? Yeah. Does that mean shit's not going to happen? Of course shit's going to happen. right? You're gonna suffer loss. You're gonna have business setbacks. You're gonna have relationship dramas, right? But if we go back to that idea of those pillars that I was speaking about before, like for me, you know, like literally right now, right, my son's looking at university and whatnot, and all I'm saying, just do something you're interested in. It doesn't matter what you think. And I know this. I'm not saying this is parent advice, just to be clear, right?
Hang on, let me get my pen out.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying. I am not saying that. But what I am saying is that he's 17, mate. You're 17.
Yeah.
Just do what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm telling you, I ever since he's been this big, and it's the same with my daughter, but ever since he's been this big, I've got 2 rules. 1, be as good a person as you can be, and just if you're doing something, be all in. No, don't half-arse it, right? So that's a Matthew McConaughey thing. Don't half-arse it, right? But I think I said it before he ever said it publicly. But it's basically the idea.
It's yours. It's you mine. Owned it.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is just do that. So you do that long enough, then you start finding out what you're interested in. Okay, cool. Now just add that to the bow, right? And then imagine, I don't know, a few years down the track, he's found what he's interested in. Okay, now how do you do that in service of other people? How do you hang around people who are all contributing to something bigger? You do that. You have a group of people that you feel where you belong. You're contributing to something bigger than yourself. Not just if you get the material gains, fantastic. But if you don't, fantastic. It doesn't matter. Like, again, that's a tricky line to sort of navigate that whole thing around material versus intrinsic reward. But I would always pursue and encourage people to pursue the intrinsic stuff, because you do that for long enough, the material will typically follow. And so long as the last bit on this is understanding the idea of contentedness. Like, be content rather than literally goes back to that whole idea of pursuing goals that we were talking about before, or outcomes, right? Know when enough is enough, and I think perhaps, in the generation, that's probably why I'm most interested in chatting with my kids about it, is that they've grown up in the social media age where success is all about appearance, accomplishment, accumulation of things. And it's like, really isn't, because I can tell you a lot of people I've worked with have got all of those things, but just empty. Their foundations are brittle, So, and I don't want you to have brittle foundations, kids.
Yeah, there's a really good podcast on Diary of a CEO with Mo Gohort. I'm going to butcher his name, but he was chief business officer at Google and had the house, the cars, the money, the everything, and wasn't happy. And then he started researching happiness, and it was really interesting to kind of unpack some of that. Yeah. So if you had to leave everyone with the first step of we've covered so much ground, so much ground. If you had to leave of just one thing to start with, if it's almost feeling overwhelming of there's so much to start, what would you recommend?
See if they can answer that question. Who are you without?
Yeah.
So, I think at the talk we were, at that event we were at, I put up on the board the statement, I am what I do. And I then split it. And so on the left-hand side, it says I am. And on the right-hand side, it says what I do. And I encourage people to get a piece of paper and do that. So on the right-hand side of the piece of paper, you've got what I do, which is easy, right? So I'm a parent, I'm a partner, I'm a business owner, I'm a insert the blank coach, blah, 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 right? But who am I without any of that on the I am? And that's the stuff where you want to, your values, the philosophies, your ways of being, the things that you can actually port into anything on the right-hand side of that piece of paper. So for me, one of those things that are on my left-hand side is calm, present, flexible. So I know that if I take calm, present, flexible and put it anywhere into my right-hand side, parent, partner, business owner, coach, podcast guest, then
you are a very calm, present, flexible podcast guest.
But you know what I mean? Will it be perfect? Will I win? No idea. But at least I know I'm stacking the odds in my favor of showing up as well as I might. Whereas sometimes, I might overprivilege the right hand side. I overprivilege coach. So I'll say yes to athletes and too many athletes. And so now I'm less present at home as a parent. So I always encourage people to get, and it takes time. It takes a lot of time to sort of get clear on what your left-hand side is. But once you are clear on that, that becomes like the compass to navigate what you're going to try and do. So yeah, who are you without your titles? That's where I would suggest you start.
I love that. Finally, can you leave us with book recommendation? Either one that's had, and it can't be yours. We are going to put a link to your book below and wait with bated breath for the new one. Yeah. But if it's one that you recommend more than others or good place to start, what would it be?
Yeah. So there's can you do two or not?
Go on, you can cheat. You're calm, present, and flexible, and I'm flexible enough to give you two.
Cool. So there's two books, and I like them sort of hand in hand because they kind of talk to pretty much everything we've spoken about today. So the first one is a book called Drive by Dan Pink.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
It's and basically it takes the theory of self-determination theory, which is what I was talking about, around belonging and autonomy and mastery, and sort of explores it on what individuals can do. But then there's a big flavour of what organisations can do to try and build environments that nurture that. I think from memory, it sort of came, I must have read it probably 15 years ago or so, something like that. So it's been out a while. Good book, easy read in terms of not overly jargony, great stories. Dan Pink, I think, is a great writer. And the other book is a book called The Fearless Organisation by Amy Edmondson. And that talks, it's a book essentially about psychological safety. And again, Amy writes really well. She's the world's leading expert in psychological safety. And again, it's got really practical things that teams and leaders can do to create an environment where people can speak up about the things that matter without fear of being shamed or criticized or fired or whatever. So both those two books, I think, hand in hand make for quite a nice sort of start point if anything I've said today kind of resonates.
I love that. I've written both of those down. I will be ordering it on Amazon in about 5 minutes. Dan, thank you so much. We will put the link in the show notes to your website, your LinkedIn, your book. Obviously, you do lots of keynote speaking, working with corporates. So we'll put all the link in the show notes. And thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Before you go, I want to do a quick shout out for our Rev Up program, which is a capability pathway which you can do as part of our public cohort or privately for your team or even for your partner ecosystem. What we did was we looked at all of the skills that you need to be successful in this current market, from AI, prospecting, emotional intelligence, storytelling. We then went and curated 10 of the best global experts to be able to deliver that learning and capability uplift in live, interactive monthly masterclasses, coupled with monthly challenges and team breakout rooms so that you start executing before you even leave the room. There is a link in the show notes so you can find out everything that you need to know. And finally, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode of Rev Up Rebellion out every Tuesday.